Hello there guys, it's Joey. So welcome to the series of my own designing, which is going to be the Shadow Ogham. So apparently I pronounced Ogham wrong, it's Ogham, and therefore I will attempt to remember to say Ogham rather than Ogham, so apologies. But there you go, we live and learn. So Shadow Ogham is about the shadow side of trees, and it came to me while I was working with a woodland energy and working within archetypes of trees and wood witches and woodlands, and the connection to the balance of all things within a woodland setting. And it occurred to me that I had not seen a shadow side of trees ever really addressed. The only time that I have a very strong memory of the shadow side of trees, the difficult side of trees being addressed, is actually in Tolkien's work in Lord of the Rings, about the forest being old, full of memory and anger, and the trees being quite aggressive, both towards the hobbits and pulling them under and tricking them and that sort of thing within the book landscape, if you like, within the story, and them being angry at the world around them, at the mistreatment, and having feelings beyond that of just, you know, a sort of purity, nature connection, and a lightness to them. And I think it's a good thought to have that, you know, actually all living beings are capable of feeling, and therefore we're all capable of feeling the range of emotions. So what is the Shadow Ogham? It's dealing with the difficult side of the self through each Ogham. So we're actually looking here at the Ogham Saille or willow, so the energies of the willow tree. And that means having a look into the reversals. You do see reversal meanings given for Ogham in its particular divinational books. Having a look at the negative connotations associated with each particular Ogham willow in this case. And this first video is going to be the discussion. We're going to have a look at the healing through dealing with problems of the Shadow Ogham, and they're going to have their own videos, and having a look at crystals and herbs and counters, things that we can do to address these elements whilst working through the scope of trees and the language of trees being Ogham. And what does that mean in terms of healing, in terms of shadow work, in terms of what we're actually looking at. And in the future videos, because it's basically going to have a format along those lines, that we're going to have an introduction video to each Shadow Ogham and what that means, and identifiers and discussion basically is the first video, and then we're going to go on to healing and counters and working with different vibrations in order to heal the effects and identify these within our shadow self in order that we progress, move on past them, integrate them into who we are, and become a better version of ourselves, basically. So, we have a couple of reversed Ogham meanings. Spiritual balance may be in conflict or upset when the Ogham Saille or willow is reversed. You need to attend more to your feminine side, observing its rhythms and dreams. From the Druid Magician Handbook. Reversed, inability to move with the situation due to rigidity, confusion, or lack of awareness. Unforeseen dangers, a difficult time that will eventually pass. In the Battle of Trees poem, Ogham Willow is described as being late to join the army. In the Stephanie Woodfield book, the reversal is given as being overwhelmed, emotional upheaval, and the need to control your emotions. My thoughts on the reversal of this particular Ogham was that it would be the moon-lunar aspect in negative. It would be nightmares, illusions, self-deceptions, as well as deceptions from other people. Deluding yourself about a situation, dreams without substance, over-emotional states, frayed emotions, and lack of control over one's self. Swamped with an emotional heaviness or an emotional stagnation from blocks. Weepiness on a grander scale, ranging from slight upsets to depression and depression states. The shadow Ogham basically of Willow, of Saille, pertains to an emotional heaviness, and it's often that the willow is associated in modern language with melancholy. And it's interesting to me that the weeping willow is so obviously associated with sadness, melancholy, depression, a low sense of emotional self, and that is the meaning which is often given to willow in a broader scope. So the negative or the shadow version or the sadness of willow is often what is most associated with the tree, which is kind of a little bit sad in and of itself, that weeping willow and sadness and tears and things of that nature are what the world associates with the tree more than anything else. But it does go to show the greater scope of the energy of the shadow side of the Ogham, that it invades popular consciousness. You can look for images of willows and there will be tears and eyes shedding tears and sad women and bowed women in sort of a sadness reaching into the water, and that tends to be the overwhelming archetype that is found within artistic spheres, at least, that is most associated with willow outside of spiritual diagrams and even within spiritual artwork. Quite frequently willow is given to have a heaviness, a sadness, a melancholy. It's interesting to me that how the shadow side of this particular Ogham has been influencing and affecting me, and it's interesting that when I came to a realization that this was a series that I needed to create, because I hadn't seen it anywhere, and I went and researched and it just didn't exist. And as I became aware of thinking about the shadow side of trees, the shadow Ogham, I became aware of the energies that were surrounding me and affecting me and influencing me, and the difficulties that I was going through on a spiritual and emotional level that corresponded to the shadow Ogham, Saille or Willow. I actually pulled a weekly, and it was tarot this time, tarot card for the Starry Eyed Facebook page, which is to do with me and sharing a weekly tarot or oracle card usually, but it was tarot. And this week we got the Empress, and you can go see the image. And the Empress is very much about emotional nurturing and taking care of one's emotional self, and the cyclic nature of women, of blood and emotions and life, death and rebirth cycles. And it was interesting to me how all these different threads just wove together, that the shadow side of the Ogham Willow was corresponding to the full moon, the emotional state around the full moon, which was in a water sign, Scorpio, so there was a real emotional upheaval sense around the particular energies, and a tendency to feel deeply, feel perhaps too much, react too much, be too weepy, and that coincided with my physical rhythms, my time of the month, my moon blood, and the cycles of emotion and blood corresponding with this Empress card, and it all came together in one moment of spiritual epiphany that was kind of scary, to be honest. It all came together in one big crescendo of movement, and it was like, wow. Willow is often associated with death as well, and mourning, the mourning of loss. And this can be this shadow side of Willow as well, that there is loss, there is grief, there is sadness. I am going to say there is already a healing through grief meditation by myself on the channel already. So if you're in a state of grieving or sadness with regards to that, and you've come across this video and this is something that you are moving through and dealing with, there is a grief video already on the channel. So you don't have to wait for anything going forward, basically, with regards to that. But Willow definitely has the over-emotional sense of hopelessness that can block one's healing in so many ways. And it can, or it tends to present itself in one of two blockages. The first is a emotional stagnation, a blockage, a refusal to feel the emotional state, the rejection of one's emotional state, the refusal to feel a certain way, and the refusal to allow your emotions to naturally go over the course on which they should be healing through. I've been meaning to, and will, as a part of this, make a video about the incorrect assertion that strong women don't show their emotions, and there is a lot of presentation in media, social media, and so on and so forth, that strong women can hide their emotions, and therefore that makes them stronger. And this is the antithesis, really, of what it means actually to be strong. And it kind of degrades women, and it degrades men as well, because like men aren't allowed to feel emotional or whatnot. And it doesn't work. It's just a falsehood perpetuated that is damaging to us as human beings. And blocking one's emotions is never a good thing. And the shadow side, and dealing with the shadow side of this particular Ogham, is going to help you realize that you cannot block the flow of anything. You can't block the flow of time, of feeling emotions, of any of it. That there has to be a natural adjustment to situations, and if you feel an emotion and you have an emotional response to a situation, that is permitted, that is allowed, that is natural, and you just have to feel it and go forward analysing why you felt that way, and accepting that some part of yourself isn't over it, isn't beyond it, is finding that situation aggravating, it makes you angry, it makes you upset, it hurts your soul, it hurts your heart, and it's okay to feel the broad scope of human emotions. And that is the first point of issue that this particular shadow Ogham addresses. Getting past all of these things, of course, is a long, sometimes arduous journey, and we're going to be talking more about how to heal past some of these blockages going forward in other videos. For the time being, we're just discussing the problems and issues and things to be highlighted by the shadow Ogham in question. The second emotional state brought about by the overflow of the shadow side of Willow is the overflowing of emotional states, becoming swamped in one's emotions is how I put it. The frayed emotions, lack of control over one's emotions running away with oneself to the point where one cannot think rationally, one cannot act, one cannot live even. And the overflow of one's emotional sense can come from a whole multitude of reasons, and one feels basically drowned in one's emotions. And given the watery nature of the world around us right now, the influence of the fading influence of the full moon as we move past it into waning into new moon, and the general state of affairs of the world and the energies of the world right now lead to an overwhelming sense of weepiness, of sadness, of emotional turmoil. And this can be seen in so many ways. It can be seen in the loss of great artists in the media. A sense of unified sadness at such loss and grieving, again, like we have touched on. It can manifest itself as a weepiness within oneself, a inability to rein it in at all, to feel everything too much, too deeply for too long, and not be able to progress, not be able to function. And whereas one side of this shadow Ogham is telling us that blockages are not good because we become stagnated and the water gets poisoned, on the other hand, an overflow of the water is also going to lead to mold and irregularity. It's going to create problems. And this can range from a general sadness, a general weepiness, to more serious conditions such as depression and everything in between. Now, obviously, working with this shadow Ogham is a spiritual practice of healing and self-recognition, and should not be used instead of, as incomplete instead of other forms of healing. It should be used alongside. So when counselling is required, and all the range of medicine, and whether it be holistic therapy and seeing doctors, and whether it be a more spiritual healing, whether it be, for the crystals and things of this nature, it's meant to be worked into a practice that is considered a whole rather than instead of. And so if you require help, you should never be ashamed of that fact, and you should speak to someone. So that is the other side of the shadow Ogham. And for Willow in particular, with its watery state, it does feel very much that we are in the area of the emotion. However, there are other symptoms of shadow Ogham energies that need addressing. The emotional state is not the only one. 4. Confusion. Confusion and a inability to focus the rational mind to get things done can very easily be tied to one's emotional states, but it can have a sort of side influence as well from one's inner energies of this particular tree manifesting themselves as problematic. You can be having a lot of nightmares, and that's to do with the dream state. That's to do with your unconscious mind. Again, you can't really take it away from the emotional state. Your emotions are definitely tied into it, but it has a slightly different manifestation, a slightly different area of problems, and dealing with and healing through the emotional and spiritual effects of the shadow Ogham particularly in this case Willow, will help with regards to that. Deluding oneself, not using one's rational mind, lying to oneself and others, is a negative aspect of oneself that requires attention. It can be very damaging and very damning to one's personality and one's energy output if one is deluding oneself about where one is, about what one's going through, about what you need, and you need a good healthy dose of honesty, and that can be a very difficult thing to find when oneself is in emotional flux. Finally, and perhaps the most difficult of things to deal with when dealing with the Shadow Ogham Saille, is the deception element from oneself and from others. And when it comes as a shock from the deceptive behaviours of other people, this can lead to a very frayed emotional state quite readily and quite easily. This is something I can relate to and is part and parcel of the cycles, yet again, this Willow month. And because it's caused by influences, factors, people outside of oneself, it becomes a lot harder in a lot of ways, because you can only control yourself and your reaction and how it influences you at any given point going forward. And again, all of that sort of information will be in another video about how to deal with it, so that we are identifying in this first video. So, going forward, what is the plan? How are we going to be looking at helping ourselves, healing ourselves, witching ourselves through the difficulties brought about by Willow in Shadow? There are as many ways to heal oneself as there are people, and there are no right answers, in my personal opinion, when it comes to how one deals with matters of a emotional turmoil, a spiritual turmoil. How we heal and deal with certain situations is largely up to us. But when I was looking at how I felt about moving forward with the Ogham, is looking at meditations, crystals, other Ogham, and healing methods that redress the balance, so that we are balancing out the Willow overflow of emotional state, so we can return to an energy of healing, an energy of more joyful healing. And those are things that I really want to address, creating a safe energy, a safe space in which to examine those parts of oneself and to heal those parts of oneself. We are creating the Shadow Grove here through the channel. We are taking a good look at the shadow side of trees and what that means within ourselves. So looking at the shadow side of the Ogham, which is reflected in our own souls, our own beings, our own energies, our own behaviours, and then looking at how we create a balance of our shadow self, our shadow Ogham, our shadow tree, with the more positive energies of the particular Ogham going forward. I'm actually super excited and super pleased and super proud of this conception of this side of the Ogham, and taking it forward. It's going to be my baby, my project. I'm really pleased for it, and I hope that going forward you will join me on this journey and that you get something out of it. So that's it for this particular video. Many blessings.